My wife was a hopeless romantic, sweet, naive, and completely blinded by love. Unfortunately, the man she worshipped wasn't me. It was Makoto, the Prince Charming who had once saved her life. Because of him, she hated me, the man she had been forced to marry. No matter how devotedly I served her or how meticulously I cared for her, I could never melt the ice around her heart. Even after a car accident left her in a vegetative state, her spirit still lingered beside her body, waiting for her great hero to rescue her from my clutches. Then, the very next day, Makoto strolled through the door with a cheeky grin. "George, thanks for all your hard work, seriously." Then he said, "Disconnect her oxygen supply. Let her go sooner. That way, we can both get our hands on the money sooner." Chapter 01. The steady beeping in the intensive care unit sounded like a stopwatch counting down to death. I stared expressionlessly at Willow, who lay on the hospital bed with tubes running all over her body. She was my wife, on paper, at least. Now she was in a vegetative state. I counted on my fingers. There were only 3 months left on our 5-year contract. 90 days. 5 million would be enough for my sister and me to live comfortably for the rest of our lives. After that, I would finally be free, like a prisoner who had finished serving his sentence. The doctor approached me with the test results, his expression grave. "Mr. Wang, Miss Liu has suffered extremely severe brain damage. The chances of her regaining consciousness are almost non-existent." He suggested giving up the excessively expensive and aggressive treatment and transferring her to a regular long-term care facility. In plain terms, we would simply be waiting for her to die. I looked at him calmly. "Transfer her to the best private VIP room. There shouldn't be any need to worry about the cost." The doctor froze. The look in his eyes shifted from sympathy to admiration. He probably thought this was true love. What he didn't know was that ours was only a contractual marriage. My job was to protect Willow Liu's physical safety. As long as she was still breathing, I hadn't failed my assignment. Besides, her family had no shortage of money. The private ward was quiet, with only the sound of the medical equipment filling the room. I wrung out a warm towel and began the same routine I performed every day. I wiped her face, her neck, her arms, and every inch of her skin. My movements were precise, my pressure even, as though I were maintaining an expensive porcelain doll. I turned her over, patted her back, cleaned up after her, and massaged her stiff muscles. Everything was done in perfect order, without the slightest trace of emotion. This was a job, I reminded myself. The final step was placing her hand back beneath the blanket. Her fingers were still long and slender, but completely lifeless. A young nurse came in to change her medication. When she saw what I was doing, she couldn't help sighing with admiration. "Mr. Wang, you're so good to your wife. You're incredibly patient with her. I'm sure she'll recover." I said nothing and merely nodded. Inside, I felt nothing at all. Recover? I would rather she didn't. Once she woke up, she would go back to being that spoiled heiress who constantly ordered me around, and my life would become even more miserable. It was better for her to stay like this. At least we could both have some peace and quiet. I looked at her pale face. The mouth that had once hurled countless cruel words at me was now peacefully closed. What a rare sight. I even felt that this was the most peaceful we had ever been together in the past 5 years. I knew that, in other people's eyes, I must have looked devoted enough to be the hero of some tragic romance movie. A good husband who refused to abandon his wife and patiently cared for her while she lay in a vegetative state. It was all an act. I had been performing for 5 years. By now, I was used to it. What I didn't know was that my performance had gained an invisible audience, Willow herself. Her spirit was floating near the ceiling, arms crossed, watching my performance with a cold sneer. Her eyes were filled with contempt as she said, "Stop pretending, George. If my father hadn't forced me, I never would have married you. Makoto is the only man I've ever loved. You're the bastard who tore us apart." Chapter 02. Her spirit floated in midair, apparently reliving memories that were anything but pleasant. The 5 years of our marriage had been like a silent film playing on an endless loop. I catered to her every whim and obeyed her every word. If she said the soup was too salty, I immediately poured it out and made another batch. If she suddenly craved a late-night snack from the west side of the city, I would drive across town in the middle of the night to buy it for her. But after taking a single look at it, she would frown and say she had lost her appetite before dumping it straight into the trash, because it hadn't been bought by Makoto. With me, she was an untouchable queen. In her eyes, I was nothing more than a dog wagging its tail and begging for money. Everything I did was merely an attempt to please her, and to please the father who paid my salary. To her, it was all a cheap, sickening performance. The doctor said I should talk to her more often. A familiar voice might stimulate her cerebral cortex and give her a chance of waking up. And so, another task was added to my daily routine. Today will be partly cloudy, with a high of 28 degrees. Good weather for outdoor activities, though I suppose that doesn't apply to you. In the latest news, China's A-share market fell again. Good thing I never invested. The cafeteria downstairs has a new menu today. The braised pork looks pretty good. I sat beside the bed and read the news from my phone in a flat voice. The content was as dull as a corporate board meeting. I had no idea that Willow, hovering near the ceiling, was irritably covering her non-existent ears. "Shut up, George. Can you stop making me listen to that disgusting voice of yours? Do you think this is going to move me? It only makes me hate you even more." After I finished reading the news, it was time to hang her nutritional 4. I tore open the package, took out the 4 tubing, cleared the air from the line, and expertly inserted the needle into the bottle. Then I hung it on the 4 stand and adjusted the flow rate to 60 drops per minute, not 1 drop more, not 1 drop less. Every movement was smooth and precise, like a robot following a preset program. Once I was done, I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes to rest. Willow's spirit floated in front of me, studying my calm face. The contempt in her eyes deepened. Biting her lower lip, she muttered, "Go on, keep acting. Deep down, you're probably hoping I never wake up, aren't you? That way, you can keep taking my father's money, living in my house, and enjoying a life of luxury. You've certainly planned this well." The more she thought about it, the more convinced she became that her suspicions were right. Her hatred for me was almost tangible. At the same time, her heart was filled with longing for Makoto, the man she believed was her true love. "Makoto, why haven't you come to see me yet? Please come and take me away. I don't want to see this disgusting man anymore." She waited for her knight in shining armor to come and rescue her from the clutches of the villainous George. Chapter 03. The door to the hospital room was kicked open. My best friend, David, stormed in like a walking ball of fire. With a loud bang, he slammed 2 dark packets of traditional herbal medicine onto the bedside table, making the glass of water wobble. "I got these for you. They'll help restore your strength." Panting heavily, he pointed at my face and cursed. "If you don't start taking care of yourself, you're going to collapse. Just look at your face. You're as pale as a ghost." Anyone who didn't know better would think my best friend had been completely drained dry. Without turning around, I replied, "Thanks." I carefully checked all the monitors displaying Willow's vital signs, then tucked the corner of the blanket that had slipped off her body back into place. My movements were steady, without a trace of unnecessary emotion. David's temper flared instantly. He grabbed my wrist with terrifying force. "You're still taking care of her? George, what the hell is wrong with you? Haven't you already done enough for this ungrateful woman? Has she ever appreciated a single thing you've done?" Hovering near the ceiling, Willow crossed her arms and said in bewilderment, "What has he ever done for me?" Her translucent brows knitted together. "Hasn't he just worked as my bodyguard, cooked for me, and done my laundry? My father paid him for all of that. What's so special about it?" When I remained silent, David became even angrier, his voice rising several octaves. "You've worked yourself to the bone serving her. You take care of her every need, protect her, and put up with all her ridiculous mood swings. What exactly are you getting out of it? You enjoy being insulted by her. You enjoy having her treat you like dirt. Even her best friend Maria couldn't stand watching it anymore and said a few good words on your behalf." Willow immediately cut her off. "And what happened afterward? That bastard Makoto had someone threaten Maria. Have you forgotten? All because she told Willow to treat you better. One's a scumbag and the other's a heartless bitch. Why are you still wasting your time on them?" I finally reacted and raised a hand. "That's enough." My voice was quiet, but it carried an unmistakable chill that left no room for argument. "There's no point talking about it now. It won't be much longer. The time is almost up." David froze and stared at me as though I had lost my mind. "What time is almost up? Have you gone insane? Don't tell me that brainless woman has broken your heart so badly that you've lost your senses." The corner of my mouth twitched. "Of course not." David was about to continue, but the coldness in my eyes stopped him. Meanwhile, Willow, floating in midair, felt confused for the first time. Makoto had sent someone to threaten Maria. All she remembered was having a terrible argument with Maria. After that, Maria had never contacted her again. Willow had assumed Maria was being petty and was jealous of her relationship with Makoto, but it had actually been because of George. For the first time, Willow's spirit was genuinely shocked. David's words struck her like a hammer, cracking the beliefs she had always considered unshakable. Could it be that George had done more than cook for her and act like a pathetic simp? Were there things he had done for her that she knew nothing about? Chapter 04. Seeing that nothing he said could get through to me, David looked ready to explode. His face turned bright red, like a boiled shrimp. "George, have you been abused so much that you've lost your mind?" The next second, there was a sharp ripping sound. He grabbed the collar of my short-sleeved shirt and tore it open, sending several buttons flying. 2 centipede-like scars stretched across my chest and arm, fully exposed. One ran across my chest, only a few inches from my heart. The other extended from my shoulder all the way down to my elbow. Against my unnaturally pale skin, drained of color from blood loss. They looked like two hideous cracks that would never truly heal. David pointed at the scars, his eyes turning red. Take a good look. Don't you remember what happened during our sophomore year? He turned and glared fiercely at Willow on the bed, as though he wanted her to hear every word. This precious heiress of yours insisted on sneaking off campus in the middle of the night to meet Makoto. And what happened? She ran into a group of drunken thugs. They nearly dragged her into the woods. And where was her so-called hero? David's voice dripped with contempt and mockery. He ran. He ran without even looking back and left her there alone. And you fucking idiot. He kicked the stool aside and pointed at my face. You charged in to save her. Beneath the empty ceiling, I seemed to sense a bone-deep chill, as though the temperature in the room had suddenly dropped several degrees. Willow's spirit was badly shaken. Of course she remembered that attack. It had always been one of the most dramatic chapters in her love story with Makoto. In her version of the memory, Makoto had been the hero who rescued her from danger. David's scornful voice continued. You took 3 knife wounds for her. 3. You almost died in that filthy alley. And what happened afterward? That coward who ran away took all the credit. When she woke up, the first person she saw was her precious Prince Charming, completely unharmed. Hell, it would have been a crime not to give him the award for Best Actor. And you, George, were the biggest clown alive. Even Gotham City couldn't find another clown as dedicated as you. Batman himself would have lit you a cigarette and said, "You've worked hard, buddy. Go back to Arkham and get some rest." I said nothing, because everything David said was true. After that incident, I spent more than a month in the hospital before I finally pulled through. By the time I returned to school, I had fallen far behind in my classes. Her father had even called her personally and asked her to help me catch up. What had she said back then? He's a grown man. Can't he study on his own? He's not a child. Makoto was injured saving me. I need to take care of him. I don't have time to worry about anyone else. Right. She had been busy caring for her severely injured knight in shining armor. I remembered how heartbroken she had looked, begging to see Makoto's wounds. And what had Makoto said? Don't look, Willow. The wound is terrifying. I'm afraid it'll scare you. For you, an injury like this is nothing. Looking back, it had truly been an award-worthy performance. He hadn't even needed a band-aid. So what exactly was supposed to scare her? His skin, which was thicker than a fortress wall. A massive doubt had probably already exploded inside Willow's mind. Her pale, translucent fingers unconsciously reached toward the longest scar across my chest. She couldn't feel it, but she could see how uneven and jagged it was. Chapter 05. David continued. And what about a week ago? His voice rose another octave, filled with the exasperated fury of someone watching a hopeless fool ruin his own life. This idiot got into a car accident, and the hospital was running dangerously low on blood. So you rushed over like a complete moron and donated your own blood to save her. He pointed at my face, looking both furious and heartbroken. Look at yourself. You donated 400 milliliters. Do you have a death wish? What's the point of saving someone in a vegetative state? Is she ever even going to wake up? I finally frowned. David, stay out of it. This is a hospital room. Stop causing a scene. I have my reasons for doing all this. David snapped. What reasons? What reason could possibly be worth risking your life? He was so furious that he nearly laughed. You're the Joker. You're Milhouse. You're Tom freaking Cat. You're a custom-made version of Milhouse. Lisa has already gone on a field trip with someone else, and you're still standing outside her house writing love letters to her. You moved heaven and earth and managed to move yourself, but what did you get in return? All she has in her heart is her Bart Simpson and Jerry Mouse. David's words were like a rusty blade sawing back and forth across my heart. At last, I couldn't hold it in anymore. What else could I have done? My voice was quiet, carrying a cold, bone-deep exhaustion. I pinched the bridge of my nose. The thing I regret most is not admitting that I was the one who took those 3 knife wounds. But how could I have told her the truth back then? I spent more than a month in the hospital before I returned to school. By then, that bastard Makoto had already wrapped himself in the glory of a hero and performed the entire story for her. With how obsessed she was with Makoto at the time, do you think she would have believed me if I had suddenly stepped forward and told her the truth? I gave a self-mocking laugh. She would only have thought I was shameless and despicable, jealous of her precious hero, and desperate enough to steal the credit for saving her life. After that, every day I spent beside her would have been worse than hell. And it wasn't just me. Even when her father personally explained everything to her, she ignored him. She thought he was deliberately lying to bring the two of us together. She didn't even believe her own father. Why would she believe someone like me, who was only being paid to do a job? The moment I finished speaking, the air in the hospital room seemed to freeze. Willow's spirit near the ceiling was no longer merely falling apart. It had been completely shattered. Blood. He had given me his blood. No wonder his face was as pale as a ghost. A few days ago, he had donated his own blood to save her. She remembered that her father had once told her she had a rare Rh-negative blood type, sometimes nicknamed panda blood because of how uncommon it was. Her father had also said, "George has the same blood type as you. That's one of the reasons I chose him." How had she responded at the time? "Dad, that's disgusting. You're only hiring a bodyguard. Why does his blood type have to match mine? What do you think he is? A walking blood bank?" Looking back now, she was the disgusting one. She had never cared enough to learn anything about George. Countless fragments of memories she had once ignored now became shards of the sharpest glass, piercing every inch of her soul. The food George prepared for her was always warm because she had a sensitive stomach. She complained that it was too greasy and threw it away. Whenever she came home late, George always left a dim lamp on in the living room because she was afraid of the dark. She accused him of meddling and wasting electricity. Whenever she was on her period, George quietly prepared brown sugar water and heat patches because the pain always left her face deathly pale. She complained that the drink smelled like herbal medicine and poured it straight down the drain. All the details she had once dismissed with contempt now weighed on her like mountains, crushing the breath from her soul. For the first time, she began to examine herself. Had her coldness, cruelty, and complete disregard for George truly been justified? She had treated him like a tool purchased with money, someone she could summon whenever she wanted and dismiss whenever she grew tired of him. But what if that tool had been protecting her with his life all along? Blinded by her own foolishness, she had taken the honor that rightfully belonged to him and placed it on another man's head with her own hands. Was she guilty? Bang. David slammed the door behind him. The deafening sound seemed to silence the entire world. Only the steady beeping of the medical equipment remained in the hospital room. Willow's spirit curled up in midair like an infant abandoned by the entire world, weeping without a sound. For the first time, her heart ached unbearably for George, but hidden beneath that agony was a terrible question she was too afraid to face. Just how much did she owe him? Chapter 06. After David left, the door slammed shut with a deafening crash, and the entire world fell silent. Only the monotonous beeping of the medical equipment remained. Expressionless, I bent down and picked up the 2 dark packets of herbal medicine. The strong medicinal smell was almost enough to make me cough. David had always been like that, a firecracker ready to explode at the slightest spark. But the truth was, he wasn't wrong. I really was a clown. Even clowns had to make a living, though. I placed the packets neatly on the bedside table. I would brew one later and see how it tasted. I couldn't afford to collapse during the final 3 months. I walked over to the bed and looked at the motionless Willow. Her face seemed even smaller than before, as pale as a sheet of paper. Taking her arm, I began moving her joints for her. Her wrist, her elbow, and her shoulder. Every movement was gentle and precise. I spoke quietly to myself, as though I were talking to her and to myself at the same time. The doctor told me to do this. He said it would slow down muscle atrophy. If you wake up, it'll make your rehabilitation easier. Wake up. I laughed inwardly. It would be better if she didn't. I didn't want to see that contemptuous, disgusted expression on her face again. I didn't want to hear her say, "George, you're disgusting." Staying like this was better for both of us. Holding her slender hand, I carefully flexed each of her fingers one by one. Willow's spirit hovered directly above George. She looked at his pale face, the dark circles beneath his eyes, and the slight weakness in his movements caused by excessive blood loss. For the first time, she truly looked at him. It was not the condescending scrutiny she had once subjected him to, nor the cold indifference with which she had ignored him. Now, her gaze was filled with heartache, guilt, and emotions too complicated to put into words. She remembered the dim lamp that was always left on in the living room and the figure sleeping lightly against the sofa. Then she noticed the fresh needle mark on the back of George's hand, left behind when his blood had been drawn. She remembered what David had said. 400 milliliters. She had an extremely rare blood type, and the entire city's blood supply had been running dangerously low. Yet George had rolled up his sleeve without a moment's hesitation. Her spirit trembled as she reached out with a translucent hand. She wanted to touch George's face and smooth away the exhaustion between his brows. Her fingertips gently landed against his cheek. Then they passed straight through him without resistance. There was no warmth, no sensation, nothing at all. It was as though she had never existed. Suddenly, I felt a chill against my forehead. It was as though something cold had brushed across my face. I instinctively raised a hand and touched my forehead. An indescribable sense of pressure settled over me. It felt as though a pair of eyes were staring fixedly at me. Another inexplicable chill swept lightly across my forehead. It was faint and icy, like a cold feather gently brushing against my skin. I paused and touched my forehead again. There was nothing there. Was the air conditioner blowing directly at me? I looked up at the ceiling, but the vent was on the other side of the room. The windows were shut tightly as well. I frowned. What was that? Did the temperature drop? I muttered. No. This felt far too strange. I couldn't help touching my forehead again. but the chill had already disappeared. A ridiculous thought entered my mind. Don't tell me there's some kind of ghost in here. Has a female ghost taken a liking to me? I gave a self-mocking smile and spoke to the empty air. Lady, your eyesight must be terrible. What exactly do you like about me? My handsome face? Or the fact that I'm such a devoted husband, taking care of my comatose wife? Just so you know, I'm completely broke. Even the paper money I burn for you would have to be the cheapest kind. If you're looking for a lifelong meal ticket, go out the door and turn left. The old man in the next room is loaded. Even I found it slightly amusing after I finished speaking. I was probably so exhausted lately that I had started hallucinating. I shook my head, trying to cast the absurd incident from my mind. Yet the sensation of being watched only seemed to grow stronger. There was even a faint, indescribable sadness behind it. I didn't see it. In the air above my head, beyond the reach of my sight, a transparent tear slipped out of nothingness. It struck the floor without making a sound or leaving a trace. Willow was looking at me with an expression I had never seen before, desperately wanting to say something, but I could neither hear nor see her. Chapter 07. Just as I began to think the room felt strangely haunted, the door burst open with a loud bang. Willow's best friend, Sophia, rushed in like a gust of wind. Like a precision-guided missile, she launched herself straight toward Willow's bedside. Willow, my poor Willow, how could this happen to you? Her cries were so anguished that she sounded ready to die alongside her on the spot. How could you be so unlucky? She sobbed. What am I supposed to do without you? Her performance was so dramatic and over the top that even the dogs downstairs might have started howling along with her. I stood to one side, watching her performance without expression. The mockery in my eyes was almost overflowing. She really was an acting student. Her fundamentals were certainly solid. I picked up a fresh towel and continued wiping Willow's fingers, as though the award-worthy drama unfolding before me didn't exist. After wailing for a while, Sophia probably realized that her only audience member wasn't cooperating. Her sobs gradually quieted. Still sniffling, she turned toward me and looked at me with swollen, tearful eyes calculated to inspire pity. Then her tone changed, taking on a condescending note of command. George, you have to take good care of my best friend. She's always been sharp-tongued but soft-hearted. She may usually seem a little cold toward you, but deep down, she does care about you. I almost burst out laughing. She cared about me. Perhaps the only place I held in her heart was at the top of her blacklist. I slowly set down the towel, a faint smile appearing on my lips. Looking at Sophia, I spoke as casually as though we were merely making small talk. Wouldn't you rather she died? The grief on Sophia's face instantly froze, like a cheap plaster mask. If she dies, there'll be no one left to compete with you for your boyfriend. Then you and the men you love can finally be together openly. Isn't that right? All the color drained from her face. Her eyes darted around in panic, like a cat whose tail had just been stepped on. What nonsense are you talking about? Sophia shrieked. Her voice suddenly became piercing, cracking slightly with fear. Willow and I are incredibly close. We're best friends. I don't even have a boyfriend. The more she spoke, the more flustered she became. Her gaze darted everywhere, refusing to meet mine. At that moment, her reaction was the clearest answer of all, and the air in the hospital room grew even colder. Chapter 08. Sophia's face turned green, then pale. She was so mortified she could have dug herself a 3-bedroom apartment with her toes. Just then, the door opened again. The man she had been waiting for, Makoto, finally arrived. He looked polished and respectable in a perfectly tailored suit, his hair combed neatly into place. The moment I saw him, I tossed the towel in my hand into the basin. Water splashed everywhere. Well, look who's finally here, I said with a smile. Even I found the sarcasm in my voice cutting. Willow's true love is back, so you can take care of her now. I'll stop getting in the way and get lost. Makoto frowned. Without even glancing at me, he walked straight over to Sophia. He spoke as though he were merely stating an obvious fact. She's your wife. Of course you should take care of her. What does that have to do with me? At last, he glanced at Willow on the bed. The disgust in his eyes was completely undisguised. You expect me to clean up her piss and shit? Not a chance. As if she deserves that from me. The air in the room dropped below freezing. A bone-chilling cold seemed to seep from the cracks between my bones. I even felt that the female ghost I had imagined hovering near the ceiling might want to kill someone right now. I thought that if Willow's spirit really was here, those words had probably nailed her to the spot. This was the man she had loved and longed for all these years. Yet now that she was in a vegetative state, even looking at her seemed to disgust him. Apparently, Makoto didn't think his words were cruel enough. He impatiently glanced at the expensive watch on Willow's wrist, the one Willow had given him. If I hadn't tricked that love-addled idiot into signing an inheritance agreement back in middle school, she promised I'd receive a fortune when she died. Do you really think I'd willingly come to a depressing place like this? Boom. It felt as though the air in the entire room had exploded. An inexplicable gust of wind roared past my ears, making the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. That female ghost seemed to have gone mad. I couldn't see her, but I could sense a wave of hysterical rage and despair surging furiously toward Makoto. I even thought something invisible passed through his face, making him shudder instinctively. At that moment, Willow was repeatedly clawing at the face she had once loved with her translucent fingers. You bastard. You lying piece of shit. I'm not some love-addled idiot. You're the fraud. You've been deceiving me all these years. I'm not dead yet. I can still wake up. Can't you even be bothered to keep pretending? I couldn't hear the ghost's silent screams, but I was rather looking forward to seeing Makoto torn to pieces. Willow's spirit completely lost control. The men she had loved for more than a decade had only ever loved her money. Now, he couldn't even be bothered to pretend otherwise. Chapter 09. Makoto completely ignored what I had said. Instead, he took Sophia's hand, smugly rubbing his thumb across the back of it as he began showing her off. The gesture made her look like some cheap trophy he had just won. She's nothing like Sophia, he said. The smugness in his voice was almost sickening. She's considerate and knows how to treat a man. Sophia leaned coyly against him as though she had no bones in her body. Neither of them treated me like an outsider, nor did they regard the woman lying on the bed as a living person. Makoto's gaze swept over Willow as though she were a pile of garbage. Did you really think I loved her? She's just a naive, love-addled fool. When we were kids, all it took was a few sweet words to have her completely wrapped around my finger. Then she grew up and started pretending to be some pure, innocent maiden. She wouldn't even let me touch her properly. It was fucking disgusting. The invisible gust around me intensified, making every hair on the back of my neck stand on end. I was certain the air conditioner wasn't blowing that strongly. Willow's spirit was roaring in fury. Sophia burst into shrill, grating laughter. Exactly, Makoto, she said sweetly. Then, with the confidence of an expert, she proudly shared her personal philosophy. Hold hands on the first day, kiss on the second, get a hotel room on the third. That's how quickly a normal woman should move. I was left speechless. Willow's heart had probably shattered completely by now. At this rate, her comatose body would either wake up from rage or die from it. The men she loved most and the woman she considered her best friend had joined forces to humiliate her beyond measure. If she could hear them, she probably felt like the greatest fool in the world. Willow's spirit stared at the shameless couple in front of her, then looked at George standing silently beside them and at her own body on the bed. One was covered in tubes, lying as still as a corpse. The other stood expressionlessly beside her, his posture straight and vigilant like a bodyguard. At that moment, she must have finally seen the truth. Who had been sincere, and who had been pretending? Who was a monster wearing human skin, and who had been her silent guardian all along? I said nothing and simply watched them. Apparently, my life as a clown came with a front row seat to a vulgar comedy double act. You really did learn something new every day. Chapter 10. When I didn't react, the two of them seemed to lose interest in performing without an audience. Makoto turned his attention to me, his face plastered with a cheap sense of superiority. You pathetic simp. He looked at me with contempt. You spent 5 years groveling at her feet. What did you get out of it? Did she ever even look at you properly? I said nothing and merely stared at him in silence. Sometimes, silence was the best slap in the face, but he apparently mistook my silence for cowardice. His smile grew even more smug, like a weasel that had just stolen a chicken. Then he voluntarily dropped an explosive confession, speaking in a low voice. You know something? About that time you took those knife wounds for her. I simply told her I was the one who saved her, and she believed me. He leaned closer and lowered his voice, every word dripping with pride. She loved me even more afterward. Tell me, isn't she a complete fucking idiot, totally blinded by love? A cold gust seemed to sweep past me. The windows were clearly shut, yet my hair actually moved. My family came from a long line of martial artists. We weren't superstitious, but we had always respected the possibility of spirits. Still, Lady Ghost, your resentment is getting a little intense. Inwardly, I applauded Makoto. Impressive. The man was practically a walking self-incrimination machine. My instincts told me that Willow might actually be able to hear what was happening around her. Even modern medicine acknowledged that some patients in a vegetative state could still process sounds from the outside world. Were you really that fearless? Or did you assume someone would burn you a 3-bedroom apartment in the afterlife? I thought to myself, you'd better anger Willow to death, because if you actually make her wake up, you're going to have the time of your life. At that moment, I imagined the woman on the bed was no longer devastated. She had probably gone numb, and beneath that numbness was hatred. The kind of hatred that made someone want to grind his bones to dust and scatter the ashes. Seeing this, Sophia hurried to join in, beginning to criticize Willow right in front of her hospital bed. Just look at her now. She clicked her tongue twice, her eyes filled with malice. She's dry, skinny, and sickly yellow. She looks like a corpse. She's hideous. Then she deliberately thrust out her rather unimpressive chest. Unlike me, Our Makoto keeps me so well satisfied that my skin is glowing and my complexion is rosy. My eyelid twitched. Keeps you well satisfied. That was certainly an interesting choice of words. Were the two of you a plant and its gardener? Apparently. Sophia still didn't think she had said enough. After a brief pause, she continued. If she hadn't been selfishly clinging to a man she couldn't satisfy, Makoto and I would have been able to be together openly a long time ago. She placed all the blame on the woman lying helplessly on the bed, unable to defend herself. This is all her fault. The cold wind in the room seemed to transform into a tornado, spiraling furiously around the ward. It had to be an illusion. Willow's spirit was screaming hysterically, but no one in the real world could hear her. You cheating bastards. I hope you both die miserable deaths. Even as a ghost, I'll never let you get away with this. I couldn't hear any of it. I only felt that I really couldn't stay in this room much longer. The atmosphere was becoming unbearably oppressive. If I remained here, these two idiots might disgust me to death. Although much of what they were saying was true, they were still utterly revolting. I looked at the shameless couple, then at Willow lying silently on the bed. Chapter 11. Makoto probably took my silence as a challenge. At last, he lost his patience. His smug face turned toward me as he finally revealed the real purpose of his visit. Hey, simp, drop the act. Stop letting this love-addled idiot waste medical resources. With that, he pointed at the transparent oxygen mask covering Willow's face. It was the only thing keeping her alive. Makoto spoke as casually as if he were commenting on the weather. Coldly and matter-of-factly, he said. Pull out her oxygen tube. Let her go quietly. Then the two of us can get our money sooner. Sophia's eyes lit up like two bulbs connected to a power source. She immediately urged me on. Exactly. Hurry up and pull it out. She's nothing but a half-dead vegetable. She's useless. Keeping her alive is just a waste of money. Willow's spirit had never imagined that the men she had loved and protected for so many years would try to kill her with his own hands. And I had never imagined that these two scumbags could sink lower than the Mariana Trench. When I remained motionless, impatience flashed across Makoto's face. He actually stepped forward and reached for Willow's oxygen tube himself. What? Is the useless simp still trying to play the knight in shining armor? If you won't do it, I will. The instant his hand was about to touch the tube, I moved. I hadn't trained in martial arts for more than 20 years just to practice Tai Chi in the park. Uncle Lou, though technically, I could call him Dad, had hired me to protect Willow, even if she had only one breath left. Crack! A sharp sound rang out. I seized Makoto's outstretched wrist and twisted it backward. Even I thought I might have used a little too much force. Ah! Makoto let out a scream like a pig being slaughtered. His face twisted instantly, and cold sweat broke out across his forehead. I gave him no time to recover. I raised my leg and kicked him. I put every ounce of strength into it, striking him squarely in the abdomen. He flew backward like a torn sack, knocked over the chair behind him, and crashed to the floor in a miserable heap. Bang! As I sent him flying with one kick, my other hand shot out and slammed the red emergency call button beside the bed. A piercing alarm instantly echoed throughout the entire floor. Chaotic footsteps sounded in the hallway. The nurses and the other bodyguards who had been stationed at the nurse's desk rushed into the room immediately. Mr. Wong. What happened? The entire room descended into chaos. Sophia screamed and threw herself toward Makoto, who was sprawled on the floor. Amid the commotion, I calmly pulled out my phone, my expression cold. My movements were unhurried, as though I were ordering takeout. I dialed 3 numbers. The call connected, in a perfectly even voice, as though I were simply reporting the facts. I said into the phone, "Hello, police. First People's Hospital, VIP room 28. Someone has attempted murder inside the hospital and is deliberately causing trouble." Chapter 12. Security and the police arrived quickly. Thanks to the commotion I had caused, the entire floor became livelier than ever. Makoto was still rolling around on the floor, cursing viciously and accusing me of using my power to bully him. Sophia clung to him, sobbing pitifully as she denounced me as a violent maniac. I leaned against the wall and coldly watched the two clowns give their final performance. The officers were clearly experienced. After reviewing the surveillance footage, they each grabbed one of them and hauled them away as easily as carrying 2 chicks. I took out my phone and called Willow's father. "Uncle Lou, don't worry, I know what my duty is. Willow is fine. As for the 2 scumbags you've always been worried about, I've already called the police to deal with them. Perhaps this time, you should get rid of the problem once and for all. After all, Willow can't, and won't, stop you anymore." There was silence on the other end for several seconds before he finally spoke. "Yes, it's time to end this. Willow can't blame me for it now anyway." After I hung up, the world finally became quiet again. 5 days later, everything was completely settled, and Willow's father hurried to the hospital. He looked several years older. The blood vessels in his eyes were so dense they resembled a web. He told me that he had pulled a few strings. The charges against Makoto and Sophia had been increased. With attempted premeditated murder and several other offenses combined, they would spend at least 5 or 6 years in prison. He patted me on the shoulder, a trace of relief appearing on his face. This is for the best. When Willow wakes up, no one will be around to interfere with the two of you. You'll finally have the chance to build a real relationship. Willow's spirit, standing nearby, nodded eagerly and pleaded. That's right, honey. From now on, let's stay together and make things work. I know I was wrong. I must have lost my mind before. Unfortunately, I couldn't hear her. I looked at her father and calmly shook my head. Uncle Lou, there are still 3 months left on the contract. Even if she wakes up, we won't be together. Hearing this, Willow desperately tried to wrap her ghostly arms around me and hold my hand, clinging to me like a spoiled child, but her body passed straight through mine. No, honey, Willow begged. I haven't had the chance to make it up to you yet. How can you secretly run away and abandon me? I really know I was wrong. You want money, right? I can give you as much as you want. I'll make my father give you a fortune. You only have to stay with me. Willow's father froze. You've spent 5 years together, yet you never developed any feelings for her. I gave a bitter smile, though the amusement never reached my eyes. No, just as I never existed in her heart, she never existed in mine. To me, there was only the assignment. The moment those words left my mouth, that familiar chill swept through the hospital room again. Willow's spirit floated in front of George, frantically circling him. You do exist in my heart. You really do. I just couldn't tell the difference before, but now I can. I seemed to feel something icy brush across my face. For an instant, I thought I heard a broken whisper. You really never loved me. I don't believe you. I don't believe you could have done so much for me only because of money. Willow's spirit continued speaking beside me. Her father let out a long sigh, as though all the strength had suddenly been drained from his body. I suppose this is my fault too. I spoiled her until she became a complete fool. He looked at his daughter on the bed, his expression impossibly complicated. Back when she was in college, I was afraid someone like Makoto would deceive her, use her for money, and take advantage of her. That was why I found you and asked you to protect her at school. Your family has practiced martial arts for generations, and your father was a hero who died helping others. I trusted your character completely. That was also why I later forced her to marry you. He paused, guilt entering his voice. But then again, misfortune always seems to strike those who have already suffered the most. Your father was such a skilled martial artist. He shouldn't have died like that. He left you and your sister behind with no one to rely on. I looked up at the ceiling, my gaze drifting into the distance. My sister and I can endure hardship. My mother was the one who never deserved what happened to her. My father became the narcotics officer and hero he had always dreamed of becoming. In the end, it mattered, and it didn't, because that heroic identity was what got my mother killed. But at least the dream he had carried since childhood finally came true. Chapter 13. At that moment, the air in the entire hospital room seemed to freeze. The coldness instantly sharpened into bone-piercing icicles, as though it were trying to freeze George's very soul. The Willow whom George could not see heard everything. So their marriage had never happened because George had relentlessly pursued her. It had all been arranged by her father to protect her, and the husband she had despised as a greedy, money-grubbing simp had endured the tragedy of losing his entire family. His father had been a heroic narcotics officer who died at the hands of drug traffickers. His mother had been brutally murdered in retaliation. And what had she done? She had once pointed at George and accused him of being jealous of Makoto, claiming that he was shameless enough to steal credit for saving her life. She had called him despicable. Looking back now, who had truly been the most despicable person of all? The fortress of beliefs in Willow's heart completely collapsed. Willow's father looked at my pale face. He seemed to want to say something, but in the end, all that came out was a long sigh. George, this old man has wronged you. His voice was heavy, as though burdened by an enormous weight. When I chose you, it wasn't only because you were skilled in martial arts, came from a respectable family, and had a trustworthy character. There was another reason. I looked at him without speaking. What other reason could there be? My life was cheap, and I happened to be useful. At last, an almost unspeakable guilt appeared in his clouded eyes. Your blood type, like Willow. You have the extremely rare Rh-negative blood type. I didn't even lift my eyelids. I had known this for a long time. Otherwise, he wouldn't have questioned me so carefully about my blood type back then. Willow's father seemed to finally unburden himself of his last secret, and his voice turned hoarse. I had selfish motives. I was afraid that something might happen to her, so I treated you as a living reserve blood donor. The familiar chill returned to the hospital room. This time, there was no anger in it, only dead silence. It was like the frozen surface of a lake in the depths of winter, without even the faintest breath of wind. Willow's father rubbed his hands together awkwardly, like a child who had done something wrong. I know it was shameless of me, but among wealthy families like ours, this sort of thing is common. Common. I almost laughed. Of course it was common. The lives of the rich were precious. The lives of people like us were merely spare parts. At last, I spoke, my voice as calm as if I were discussing the weather. You paid me to do a job. It's only right that I fulfill it. Uncle Lou, you paid me. As long as they don't drain enough blood to kill me on the spot, I'm willing to give as much as they need. I meant every word. My calmness seemed to hurt him more than any furious accusation could have. The guilt on Willow's father's face deepened. I've watched you suffer all these years. You endured so much hardship, and on top of that, you had to endure her contempt. Even an old man like me couldn't bear to watch anymore. He took a bank card from inside his coat and pressed it into my hand. Take this money. Don't refuse. Go home. Start a small business, and live comfortably from now on. Your body has suffered enough. It's time for you to rest. I lowered my eyes and looked at the card in my hand. Money was useful, and I needed it, so I accepted it. Thank you, Uncle Lou. Willow's spirit immediately panicked. She desperately tried to interrupt their conversation and stop George from accepting the money. No, once you take my father's money, you can't leave. You can't go home. Willow's spirit finally understood everything. Her father had found her not only a husband, but also a bodyguard, and a man prepared to sacrifice his life for hers. He was expected to keep her safe at all times, and when necessary, he was expected to trade his life for hers. The men she had regarded as a mere commodity had actually been the most valuable safeguard in her life from the very beginning. What she owed George had long since become impossible to repay. Chapter 14. After Uncle Lou left, I held the thin bank card between my fingers. It felt like I was gripping a red-hot branding iron. Before I could put it in my pocket, the door to the hospital room opened again. Assuming it was a nurse, I didn't even look up. George, a woman's voice called my name. Trembling with tears, I raised my head and saw Maria. She was another of Willow's best friends, and the only one who had ever urged Willow to treat me better. Unlike Sophia, she didn't burst in making a scene. She simply stood there and looked at me, her eyes immediately turning red. There was no pity in her gaze. There was pain. The kind of heartache someone felt when they saw something precious shattered before their eyes. My heart skipped a beat. Please, not this again. I had already experienced more melodrama than anyone should have to endure in a single week. Come with me, she said. She strode toward me, her voice firm and determined. Stop wasting your life guarding this ungrateful woman. I shook my head wearily, my voice slightly hoarse. It's not time yet. There were still 3 months left on my contract. I had been paid to do a job, and I intended to see it through to the end. Maria grew anxious and grabbed my hand. Her palm was warm, and her grip was tight, as though she were clutching her final lifeline. Then when will it be time? She doesn't love you, but I do. I like devoted men like you. Her words came at me like a burst of gunfire. She's already in a vegetative state. Why are you still refusing to let her go? I looked at her and answered calmly. You've misunderstood me. Perhaps I'm not a devoted man at all. Have you ever considered the possibility that I've only been pretending to be deeply in love with her? I don't care, she interrupted stubbornly. The man I've seen is the man I believe you are. At least, that's who you are right now. The next second, I felt the temperature around me drop again. Maria didn't notice. She rose onto her toes and suddenly leaned toward me. A warm, soft sensation covered my lips. The kiss was forceful and demanding, leaving no room for refusal. I froze. My mind went completely blank. Had I stumbled into a den of lunatics? Why were all 3 of these women completely unhinged? A violent gust of frigid wind exploded beside my ear, making every hair on the back of my neck stand on end. What I couldn't see was Willow's spirit transforming into a vengeful ghost. She frantically clawed at Maria and me with her translucent hands, desperately trying to tear us apart, but it was useless. Her hands passed smoothly through both our bodies. Unable to contain her fury, she screamed, "You backstabbing bitch! What are you doing? What are you doing to my husband?" I couldn't hear her silent roar. Once I recovered from my shock, I immediately pushed Maria away. I didn't use much force, but my rejection was unmistakable. She stumbled back a step. Instead of getting angry, a strangely excited expression appeared on her face. She glanced at the unresponsive Willow on the bed, then looked back at me. What she said next shattered my entire worldview and, inexplicably, left me slightly intrigued. George. She licked her lips, her eyes gleaming. I know this is a hospital, but there's a bed for overnight visitors right here. We could do something exciting in front of Willow. Maybe the shock would even wake her up. She was too blinded by love to appreciate you, so I'll love the men she rejected. I'll take the men she didn't want. I was completely stunned. I wondered whether something was wrong with my hearing. What the hell? She wanted to wake a patient in a vegetative state like that. Lady, have you been reading too many trashy romance stories? Chapter 15. I pushed Maria away. I didn't use much force, but my attitude was firm. Get out. She froze, her face filled with disbelief and hurt. "George, you," I said. "Leave." There wasn't a trace of warmth in my voice. Maria's face turned deathly pale, and the light in her eyes instantly went out. Yet somehow, my rejection only seemed to make her even more interested in me. She licked her lips but ultimately said nothing more. Then she turned and left the room. At last, the world was quiet again. I leaned wearily against the wall. The melodrama of the past few days had surpassed everything I had experienced during the last 5 years combined. I looked at Willow, who was still lying motionless on the bed, and a wicked idea suddenly entered my mind. Since everything had already become this insane, I might as well add more fuel to the fire. I walked over to the bed, ran my hands over her cold legs, and resumed moving and massaging her joints. My technique remained professional, but my words were laced with poison. "What's wrong?" I leaned closer and lowered my voice to a demonic whisper. "You were saving yourself for your precious Makoto, so you wouldn't let me touch you. Are you angry now?" Her body showed no reaction. Only the heart monitor continued beeping at a steady rhythm. I let out a cold laugh and applied slightly more pressure with my hands. "Do you think I enjoy taking care of you? If your father weren't paying me so much, who would willingly touch a cold, hard block of stone like you? It's been 5 years, and no amount of warmth could ever melt you." The air in the room seemed to grow even colder. I bent down until my lips were almost touching her ear and delivered the fatal provocation in the cruelest voice I had ever used. "If you're really capable of anything, wake up and slap me. Otherwise, I really will leave with that woman. She's far more passionate than you, and much more considerate." The instant those words left my mouth, a violent blast of icy wind exploded beside my ear. In the invisible space beyond my sight, Willow's spirit was completely ignited. Jealousy, rage, and a possessiveness that had seeped into her very bones drove her utterly insane. "Don't you dare. You belong to me for the rest of your life." With all her strength, she screamed and lunged at George, trying to slap him across the face. Her translucent hand passed straight through his body without resistance, but by some bizarre twist of fate, it struck her own abdomen as she lay on the bed. The instant they made contact, a blinding white light erupted. Her wandering spirit seemed to be caught in a massive vortex and violently sucked back into her body. Beep, 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 beep. The heart monitor released a shrill alarm as the readings began jumping wildly. I abruptly straightened and stared at the hospital bed. Willow's hand, which had always hung lifelessly at her side, moved. One of her fingers had actually twitched. Holy shit, she was really going to wake up. Fuck, was I about to go back to living the same miserable, humiliating life as before? Chapter 16. The sudden change left my mind completely blank. A second later, I snapped back to my senses as though I had been electrocuted and slammed the emergency call button beside the bed. "Doctor, doctor." The entire VIP floor was instantly thrown into chaos because of me. Doctors and nurses rushed into the room after a frantic series of examinations. Everyone looked at me as though they had just witnessed a miracle. The attending physician adjusted his glasses, his voice filled with disbelief. "It's a medical miracle. Mr. Wong, Miss Lu's brainwave activity has become extremely strong. She's showing signs of regaining consciousness." I immediately notified Willow's father. When he arrived, he was so overwhelmed that he nearly dropped to his knees, gripping my hand. He thanked me over and over. "George, I can never repay what you've done for us. Please, stay for another 2 months, just until Willow makes a full recovery. I'll pay you an additional sum, a fortune." Looking at his graying hair, I eventually nodded. 2 more months in exchange for complete financial freedom for the rest of my life. It was a good deal, but I soon realized I had agreed too quickly. After waking up, Willow was completely different. The first time she opened her eyes and saw me, there was no disgust or coldness in her gaze. Instead, she looked at me with a fiery intensity one had never seen before, as though her eyes alone could melt me. They were filled with love and an almost terrifying possessiveness. When I brought her food, she refused to eat. "Hubby, feed me." She blinked at me, her voice soft and sweet as she acted spoiled. My entire body stiffened at the doctor's gesture urging me to cooperate with the patient. I reluctantly scooped up a spoonful of porridge and held it to her lips. She took it into her mouth but didn't swallow. The next second, she suddenly leaned forward and cupped my face in her hands. Then she pressed her lips against mine and transferred the mouthful of porridge directly into my mouth. I turned to stone. She licked her lips and smiled like a cat that had just stolen the cream. "Now we're even." I shoved her away, my face dark with anger. Her eyes instantly turned red, and huge tears began rolling down her cheeks. She looked like an abandoned puppy. "I'm sorry, hubby," she sobbed. She clutched the corner of my shirt and cried so hard she could barely breathe. "Please don't be so cold to me. I'm scared. From now on, I'll do anything you ask." "Okay. You can do anything you want to me." My thoughts became a tangled mess. At night, she refused to sleep unless she was holding my hand. Later, She even patted the narrow hospital bed beside her and said, "Come here, sleep with me. I can't fall asleep unless you're beside me." I pointed at the attendant's bed nearby. "I'll sleep over there." I had barely lain down when she threw off her blanket, climbed out of bed, and crawled onto my narrow cot without saying a word. Her entire body pressed down against mine. Her warm, soft curves clung tightly to me, and I could clearly feel her chest rising and falling against me. I was completely dumbfounded. "What are you doing?" She settled into a comfortable position in my arms, her voice carrying a smug smile. "If you won't sleep beside me, then I'll sleep on top of you. Let's see whether you can still get any sleep now." I no longer felt like her bodyguard or her caretaker. I had become prey targeted by an obsessive, unhinged Yandere, one who might devour me completely at any moment. Chapter 17. George. Willow lay on my chest, gently tracing her fingers across my face. "Have you really never had feelings for me? Not even a little?" Her voice was soft, yet every word struck my heart like a hammer. To bring this absurd situation to an end as quickly as possible, I had to crush every last hope she had. "No." I stared at the ceiling, my voice utterly cold and emotionless. "Never. Everything I did was for money and to fulfill the contract I signed with your father." Her body stiffened. The next second, she violently tore open my shirt. With a sharp rip, several buttons went flying. "Seriously, again?" The hideous scars stretching across my chest and arm were exposed once more. Tears instantly spilled from her eyes like a broken string of pearls. With a trembling hand, she gently touched the scar closest to my heart. Her cold fingertips slid across the uneven skin, sending a shiver through me. "You're lying." She suddenly screamed at me, her voice sharp and filled with grief. "If you didn't love me, why would you take those knife wounds for me? If you didn't love me, why would you give me your blood? If you didn't love me, why would you spend years taking care of me, protecting me, and putting up with every one of my terrible moods?" As though she had completely lost her mind, she threw herself into my arms and wrapped them tightly around me. Her grip was so strong that it hurt. "You're lying." Her sobbing voice was filled with absolute certainty and obsessive conviction. "You love me. I'm the person you love most. I know you do. You did all of those things for me. George, I love you. You're the person I love most too." Faced with such a direct and passionate confession, I felt helpless for the first time. The disguise and restraint I had maintained for 5 years were torn apart in an instant. I forced the words out with difficulty. "I really did it only for the money. Someone like me isn't worthy of you. I don't care." She jerked her head up. A disturbing fire burned in her bloodshot eyes. "If you don't love me, then I'll force you to fall in love with me." She cupped my face and kissed me fiercely. It wasn't a kiss. It was practically a bite. Her tongue forcefully pushed past my teeth with a possessiveness and madness that allowed no refusal. She invaded every inch of my mouth. She kissed me until I could barely breathe, leaving my mind completely blank. This woman had truly gone insane. Chapter 18. Willow's obsession grew worse with each passing day. She had the bodyguards bring the wedding dress and formal suit she had already ordered directly into the tiny hospital room. "George, let's get married again." Wearing a pure white wedding dress, she sat on the hospital bed with a satisfied yet obsessive smile. "This time, I'm marrying you because I truly want to." I looked at the perfectly tailored black suit and felt my scalp go numb. "No, you don't get to decide." She snapped her fingers. 2 bodyguards, both over 6 feet tall and built like bears, stepped up behind me, one on each side. They very politely made me change into the suit. Overwhelmed by their superior strength, I was forced to take part in an absurd hospital room wedding. There were no guests, no priest, only Willow's obsessive, deranged love and 2 expressionless bodyguards. "Hubby, you may kiss your bride now." She closed her eyes and tilted her face upward. I remained motionless. After waiting for several seconds, she abruptly opened her eyes, grabbed my face, and forcefully bit down on my lips. The metallic taste of blood spread between us as her tongue moved wildly against mine. I felt as though she was about to swallow me whole. On the day she was discharged, I thought I was finally going to be free. I packed her belongings as quickly as possible and immediately turned to leave. "Where are you going?" Her voice came from behind me, cold as ice. Without looking back, I answered, "The contract is over. It's time for me to leave." The next second, the same 2 bodyguards appeared in front of me like a pair of mountains. They seized me from both sides and politely escorted me into the front passenger seat of the car. Click, the doors locked. A thick rope bound my hands tightly in front of me. I had completely become a helpless fish laid out on a chopping board. Willow climbed into the driver's seat and looked at me through the rearview mirror. She gave me a sweet yet unsettling, obsessive smile. "Hubby, let's go home." The car slowly pulled away. Chapter 19. As Willow drove, she subjected me to a non-stop barrage of possessive brainwashing. "Don't even think about running away. We have a marriage certificate. You belong to me for the rest of your life. And don't even think about going to that bitch Maria. She doesn't deserve to touch a single hair on your head. My heart was in my throat, but not because of what she was saying. It was because her driving skills were clearly still terrible. The car swerved down the road in an S-shaped path, nearly scraping against the vehicles beside us several times. Terrified, I shouted, "Stop driving. You only just recovered, and your reflexes are still slow. Let the bodyguards drive. I don't want to die." "Don't worry, hubby, my driving skills are." Before she could finish, bang. A deafening crash rang out. The car spun out of control and slammed violently into a tree by the side of the road. At the moment of impact, I almost instinctively threw my bound body over her to protect her. I took the full force of the steering wheel and dashboard against my back. Her head slammed hard into my chest. Agonizing pain tore through my back, making me grimace. Even worse, I smelled the overwhelming stench of gasoline, and her foot was still pressing firmly on the accelerator. The engine roared wildly as it revved in place. "Take your foot off the gas," I screamed with all my strength. "Are you trying to kill us both?" But she seemed to have lost consciousness. She lay motionless against me. With a loud shatter, the rear window broke apart, sending countless shards of glass into my back. For fuck's sake. My assignment was almost over, and I still had to get injured one more time for nothing. The bodyguard's car behind us finally caught up. A group of them frantically pried open the doors and rushed to check on Willow. Taking advantage of the chaos, I desperately struggled free of the ropes and rolled out of the car. Ignoring the excruciating pain in my back, I immediately pulled out my phone and called Willow's father. The moment he answered, I practically wailed into the phone, "Your precious daughter has completely lost her mind. I want a divorce. Right now, immediately. Uncle Lou, I just saved her life again. We're even now. You have to help me." Then I proposed the only plan that could help me escape this insane woman for good. Fake my death. Announce that I died in this car accident, that my body was cremated, and that my ashes were scattered at sea. Give me some money and let me disappear completely. A long silence came from the other end of the phone. Finally, I heard an utterly exhausted sigh. "All right, George, I owe you that much." Chapter 20. 2 years later, in Province S. Using the severance payment Willow's father had given me, I opened several small businesses. My sister had long since made a full recovery, and she now helped me manage the accounts. My little niece had also started elementary school. She was as adorable as a porcelain doll, though she was far too attached to me. One weekend, I took her to the mall. The moment we passed a claw machine, she refused to move another step. She fed more than a dozen tokens into it without even brushing the fur of a single stuffed animal. Frustrated, she stomped her feet. Then she wrapped herself around my leg and began whining. "Help me win one. I'll call you daddy if you get one for me." "Okay. Daddy, please win me one." I tapped her on the head. Fine. Stop calling me that." I inserted 3 tokens and, without much effort, grabbed the largest stuffed animal in the machine. Smugly, I handed it to her, but the moment I turned around, the smile on my face froze. Not far away, a familiar figure was staring fixedly at me. Her gaze was so intense that she looked ready to devour me. It was Willow. I felt guilty for exactly 1 second before grabbing my niece and fleeing without looking back. That evening, to celebrate another record-breaking quarterly profit, I dragged David to a foot massage club. As he enjoyed the therapist's service, David gave me a thumbs up. "George, you're seriously incredible. I thought they'd really brainwashed you into becoming a pathetic simp. Turns out you were just biding your time and making a fortune. You'll always be my brother. You made money and didn't forget to bring me along. From now on, whoever you tell me to take down, I'll take them down." The two of us were still boasting when we walked out of the club and found several black luxury cars blocking the entrance. A car door opened. A woman wearing a black trench coat and black ankle boots stepped out. Black stockings covered her legs, making the long legs beneath her short black skirt look even paler and more seductive in the darkness. Willow. Her gaze was both icy and burning, obsessive and deranged, as she slowly walked toward me. "George, long time no see." 5 bodyguards, each built on an entirely different scale from me, seized me before I could react. When I regained consciousness, I was lying on a soft bed. Something cool and silky pressed against my wrists. I lowered my head. My hands had been tightly bound to the headboard with a pair of black stockings. Willow sat beside the bed. Her fingertips traced my cheek as she licked the corner of her lips. "Weren't you supposed to be dead?" She leaned down and laughed softly beside my ear. "What happened? Did your buddy watch a 15-second ad to revive you?" My throat went dry. "You need to calm down. Calm down." Her smile grew even more unhinged. "I searched for you for 2 years. I missed you so much I nearly lost my mind. How am I supposed to calm down?" She told me that her only source of entertainment during the past 2 years had been sending Makoto and Sophia to a psychiatric hospital and finding new ways to torment them every day. Then her tone abruptly changed, and her gaze became dangerous. You've been living rather comfortably these past 2 years. A loving wife, an adorable daughter, and a cozy home. That little girl of yours has even learned to call you daddy. I was so terrified that my soul nearly left my body. That's my niece, my sister's daughter. Oh, she dragged out the word in sudden realization. So she's your niece. I thought you'd secretly had a daughter behind my back. The misunderstanding had been cleared up, and I had only just breathed a sigh of relief when she suddenly bent down and yanked open my shirt. Her fingers pressed against the 3 faded scars on my chest. Her warm breath brushed past my ear. 3 scars, to repay what I owe you. I'll give you 3 children, 3 knife wounds in exchange for 3 lives. That's fair, isn't it? We'll start tonight. Terrified, I immediately begged for mercy. Wait, I'm not ready yet. At least let me take some supplements first. But she only smiled and pressed her entire body down against mine. Then she whispered several words into my ear. I can't wait any longer.